today we've got Michael Blumenthal joining us from Chicago. Oh, I've been watching the Bear. Brilliant. Anyway, yeah, so we've got February session on the maturity model for practitioners. It's been loads going on actually, so I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. Michael is going to be taking us through a practical scenario, looking at how to sort of manage service change and the service change management. So that's fantastic. As ever, we will start off with an overview of why we're here, what the maturity model is about. We shall do a shout out and then attempt to have a go at doing together mode and recording a video, and then talk about how you can contribute, and then go to the main event. You've already done this, but you can join us every month. It's the third Tuesday of the month, and here is a link to the reoccurring calendar invites. We'll pop that into the meeting chat for your pleasure. Sharon, would you like to take us through the purpose and the artifacts?
Sure. So the purpose of the maturity model is really to help people align processes with tools at a very high level. And as you can see, there's a ton of competencies that are out here over the years that have been produced by an ongoing team of people that have spent a ton of time helping with this. And you can see here, if you want to read this slide, here's all the information. But if you want to learn more about it, you can just simply go out to learn under the Microsoft Maturity Model area, and you can read any of the competencies that you'd like.
Thank you very much. Moving on.
The part we're going to talk about today is practical scenarios in that model.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the maturity model, it's got 5 levels, starting off at level 100, which is kind of that initial default view, working your way up through to level 500, which is kind of nirvana, panacea, best of breed. Level 200 really is around, that you're working towards something which is consistent, controlled. Level 300 is often what we kind of see as the kind of the level that you'd want to be at, provided that you've chosen that competency to focus in on that competency. Level 400 is where you're starting to use measurements and improving your quality and getting that iterative improvement as you work your way to level 500. So that's kind of how we talk about the different levels, and there's an intent on each of those levels on the right hand side. So we're going to have a go then at getting together a picture time. So I'd love you to turn your videos on. I'll have a go at getting together mode running, and I'll record that. But so yeah, if you could show us your beautiful faces, that'd be fantastic. And I will see if I can change. Let me pop that into there. Okay, and right, sorry, I'm just nearly there. Okay, great. So we've got everybody in there. Thank you very much. I'll get that recording right. My machine is catching up. Okay, please wave and shout and cheer. Just record that for a few seconds. So let's go and keep going a little bit longer. Lovely, thank you very much. Right, I think we've definitely got that this time. Okay, am I still sharing? Yes. Okay, so brilliant. We are back to my slides. Too many windows, right. So yeah, we've been sort of this year, we've really been looking to revisit a number of the competencies. So we've got Michael today talking about the practical scenarios and service management. We've got Emily's coming back next month, March the 19th, and we're revisiting staff and training and people communities. And so we've split it up. So myself and Marc and Emily working on those, and then Simon and Sharon are looking at the new employee experience competency in May. Not forgetting Michael, who's going to be talking about Power Platform governance and the Centre of Excellence. So really looking forward to having Michael with us in April. June, we're going to then revisit the content management competency, and we've got a bit of a break over July, August, and then looking at Copilot. And then this is an interesting one. In October, we're looking at, what does a mature organization do? How does it start thinking about the future and the impacts that the future may bring? So, maybe we're going to talk about like resilient organizations, that kind of thing. And November is to be decided, and that's in. So there's lots coming up. So
I can just jump in quickly, Simon.
Of course you can. Yes, please do.
So just sort of a bit of a shout out. So Sharon and I will be running a session at the North American Collaboration Summit in Texas in April on employee experience and the Viva Stack and the maturity model. So if you're happening to come to NACS, please come and join us at that. I think it's the workshop day, so before the main conference. But come along and say hello. Or better still, bring some ideas of what we've forgotten. So that'd be great.
Absolutely. And Simon, do you want to just take the next one? Because all this new stuff and how people could help us out and get involved.
Yes. Perfect. That was almost like an excellent segue, although completely unplanned. So, so there's a bunch of things that we also do, or you can do, to be involved in this wider community. So there's some links here. The first, but bottom left, is the next session. So the details of that are on the 19th of March. Sadly, I can't be here. Actually, maybe I am here. I was going to say I can't, but I'm skiing. But I'll be back by then. So so that's our next session, which I'm looking forward to myself. There are some other things you can do if you want to contribute. So community docs, first-time contributor sessions, and writing for the web. So follow that sharing is caring link. And next slide. Right, so just a quick heads up. So Michael's going to take over any moment now,
Okay.
at which point, sadly, I'm going to have to jump off because I've double booked myself. But do feel free to engage in this. You can tweet or whatever the equivalent things are today. Make sure that if you want to raise a question, you raise your hand, or put a chat into the chat box on the right-hand side, and we'll curate those and feed those to Michael. But we thoroughly encourage interaction at this point, partly because I think it makes it a lot more interesting, and partly because actually we get to learn from the interactions, the challenges, the additions that you, our global audience, have for this. So I can't overstress how good it is for us and for everybody else if you do throw your tuppence worth in. That's an English expression for those that aren't in England. Right, and I'm going to shut up and hand over to Michael. Michael, it's with great pleasure. I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me and see my screen okay? Okay. So yes, today we're going to talk about service change management, one of our practical scenarios in the maturity model. Let me start by introducing myself. Hi, I'm Michael Blumenthal. I am an MVP focused on M365 apps and services. My day job is I am the Microsoft product manager at NORC. NORC is a nonprofit and it's a social science research institute. At NORC, I am responsible for M365 service management and user adoption. One of the things this means is that I run the weekly message center triage meeting. So a question for all of you, and you can put your answers in chat here. How many message center posts are there in a year? Give you a few seconds to put an answer. Make your best guess. Put them in chat. How many message center posts are there in a year? How many changes does Microsoft announce each year through Message Center? Okay, so in my tenant, there were 1,433. Now I see the person who got closest was Terrence. It certainly feels like there's more, but it averages to be about 4 a day or 28 a week. The thing is, this is still a lot because it's important to process or triage basically each and every one of them. And this number has increased over time. A few years ago when I was measuring this, it was 2 per day. Now it's about 4 per day. And it'll probably keep growing. So triaging these is a key operational process because that's how you know what's going to change in your M365 environment. So what does an announcement look like? What are the key parts of the announcement? What's its structure? Every change announcement posted in Message Center, of course, has a title. It also has this Message Center ID number. You can see this one here, MC679737, which is the unique identifier, which is an easy way to reference a particular Message Center post. It's got a publish date, it's got the description and some timeline. This one is actually scrolled down a bit so you can't see the description at the top. But it's got a timeline of when it will roll out. Microsoft's estimate for the impact on your organization, which is often something where you need to make your own estimate of the impact based on what the change is and what you know about your organization. And then links and pictures. So some of the better ones have screenshots of what the change is, especially if it's a visual one, and links to other articles, often a blog post on Tech Community. And then, although there are some other controls in Message Center for each post, to me, one of the most important ones is the thumbs up and thumbs down. So that's what a Message Center post is. How do we measure the maturity of a process for managing these change announcements? So taking the model that was shown to you earlier, it's a five-stage model. In the previous slide, you saw it from the bottom up. I'm going from the bottom down, from the bottom to the top this way. Starting at level 100, it's basically chaos. Now, I've taken the maturity model and I've added some description to put this in the context of Message Center. I've also mapped this to another maturity model called the competency model. So you'll see that here in the middle. For the competency model only has 4 levels. Unconscious incompetence, which is you don't know what you don't know. Conscious incompetence, where you know that you don't know stuff. Conscious competence, where you know that you know it. And unconscious incompetence, which is you know it so well you don't have to think about it. So I've mapped those levels to the maturity model level as well. So for Message Center, the level 100 is that chaotic or unconscious incompetence, and it's really about putting out fires, keeping the lights on, and you may not even know the Message Center exists. Level 200 is what I think of as personally managed, one person trying to do something with all the information there. They know that they don't have a process. They know that there's stuff they ought to do. Sort of this I need to read this stuff more often awareness. Level 300 is when things start to get reasonable. This is the planned level. It's a sustainable but highly manual process. This is one of the conscious competence levels. You know that this is something you need to focus on, and you've started to doing some stuff about it. And that's you've stood up a manual process. Level 400, you're starting to mature the process, and you've got something that works pretty good. It's a better working process. So when you get to level 500, that's when things are really good, and you've got a process that works without having to really push a boulder up a hill to make them happen. And this is where you've really integrated this into, and it's a fully operational business process. So let's look at each of these in more detail. So level 100, the chaos level. No one is reading Message Center. Changes are surprising. New features ignored, and deprecations disrupt. So let's take a look at that. And you'll notice that the text here on my chaos image, which of course I had Microsoft Image Creator create. This change is actually the one about BCS deprecation. Loop is a relatively new application. If you aren't paying attention to change announcements or any of the other marketing, you might not try using Loop at all. So you're paying for having Loop and you're not using it, you're missing out on the value, the teamwork and collaboration capabilities it gives you. So that's new features are ignored. Changes are surprising if you're not paying attention to the BCS deprecation, if you're not paying attention to Microsoft trying to push people away from SMS-based MFA toward app-based MFA, when these changes happen, they could disrupt the business. So you don't want to be surprised by these, and they will interrupt the business if you're not paying attention, and at level 100, you aren't paying attention. Another thing that is important here is that one way that you see the downside of this in an organization is help desk calls rise. So the number of help desk calls that an organization has to support is higher when Message Center isn't managed. Let's go on to the next level. This is a little better, and this is about knowing that you ought to be doing something here. Sometimes you read the Message Center, usually reactively of something changed. Oh, maybe I can find something about the Message Center. When you do read the Message Center, does that drive communication to the organization about what the change is? Sometimes at this level. And there's no time or attempt to assess a change in advance or mitigate it. Level 300 is when things start to get manageable. Here you've got a defined process. If I think about the different ways that I've managed Message Center over time, there is a weekly email that you can have Message Center send you. And at one point I had a process where I would take that email and paste it into OneNote, go into Message Center, paste in all the details for each change, and then share that with the different service owners. So when I say service owners, I mean the person in charge of Exchange, the person in charge of SharePoint, the person in charge of OneDrive, the person in charge of, etc., the different people responsible for administration of the different workloads. And at that point, communications team wasn't necessarily integrated into that. So a primitive but still functional process was to start from the email that summarizes all the changes and do the triage based on that email. A more sophisticated process is to have Message Center sync all the changes to Planner, which is a built-in function capability, and then review them in Planner. And that is the current process that I have at NORC. Is that we get the team together and we go through all the messages that are now tasks in the first column in Planner, and we triage those. We close some, we assign some. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So I've got a Message Center here, but I really don't see Message Center itself as a great place to try to triage the messages. It really takes starting from that data and moving it someplace else to make it workable. And again, at this level, it's a very manual process. There may be some attempts to identify, okay, this change is coming up. Let's take a deeper look at that, find out more. What can we do to perhaps turn off this feature so that it doesn't arrive on Microsoft's schedule, but we can possibly make it arrive on our schedule. Some communications to end users are attempted. Hey, a new version of Outlook or a change to Outlook is happening, and this is what you'll see. This is where, at this level, you start using the thumbs in a Message Center post to provide feedback to Microsoft, especially about changes you don't like. But the volume of changes is still really difficult to deal with. When we get to level 400, this is still dependent on humans to run the process, but it is much more supported by tools, and the process is much more predictable and maintainable. So at this level, I feel like Message Center review is a team sport. We're getting everyone together I think at this level, it's in Planner. And you've got a process where you've built out say, additional planner buckets. Maybe it's one per workload, or depending on how you want to organize the triage. I mean, inventing that process really varies a lot from organization to organization. But one model I've seen is each workload gets their own bucket and planner, and as you triage the items that come into the first bucket and planner, you decide which ones can be closed, other ones which need to be assessed. If something needs to be assessed or mitigated, then it goes into the bucket for that workload, and the person responsible for that workload is going to follow up on that, make some decisions, research, whatever, to decide how that change will be handled, and then close that. And at this point, the process is starting to be measurable, like the metric I had at the beginning about the number of changes in our tenant. At the end of the year, we did analysis. We counted the number of changes. We did a pivot table to see how many changes we had for each workload. You start measuring the process, because that's one of the keys to improving it. And I should also mention here that communication is a key part of this, where you have enough runway with any given change that there's time to communicate to the end users about it before, during, or after it happens, depending on what the change is and how communications could be most effective. Sometimes if you do changes too early, users will forget about what you said before they actually see the change. But communication plans can be laid out and executed for these changes, because you've got enough runway on them. Let's go to the next level. The last level, this is the rainbows and unicorns level. This is when you've got this process running as smoothly, as automatedly as possible, but you're always looking for ways to improve it. So this is characterized by workflow investments. So, for example, right at level 400, assigning a planner task, which is a message center post, to a service owner is probably a manual process. At this level, at level 500, you've invested in some kind of automation to automatically do that assignment. And whether you're using machine learning to look at all the assignments you did manually and then make an educated guess about which workload or service owner should get this message center change, or if it's just you have a set of rules and you search for keywords or whatever, but you're using some kind of automation to make that a step of assigning a change to a service owner automated. So you're investing in workflow. You're also investing in integration. So when a change is judged to be something that is impacting all end users, or otherwise is something that your existing enterprise IT change management processes need to be involved in, and in a couple of the organizations I've been part of, that we've used ServiceNow for that. So you have a change request in ServiceNow, and then there's the change review board, and they review those changes and approve or deny different ones. At this level 500, selected changes are automatically sent into your change request process, and you're also trying to measure everything you can about this process to understand its impact and ways to make it better. Another thing that's characterized by this level is that you are providing feedback and seeing Microsoft as more of a strategic partner. And so when a change comes through, you may already have heard about it outside of Message Center. You are giving feedback, especially, again, thumbs down is more often where people are spending time in the feedback process than thumbs up, but sometimes doing thumbs up ones as well. But also, that's not just the thumbs down Message Center. It can be also going into the Microsoft feedback portal and posting a new suggestion or voting up existing suggestions that relate to a particular change. It can be working with one's account team on design change requests. It can be participating in customer connection calls, which Microsoft has been doing more and more frequently. For example, there's a customer connection call for OneDrive, there's one for Stream, and trying to connect with engineering. Sometimes it's making those connections at conferences and trying to advocate for the customer perspective to the engineering teams to make the product better overall as time goes on. So that is the 5-tier model here. And just recapping what we just talked about, level 100 starts at chaotic, level 200 is personally managed, level 300 is planned, and 400 effective, and 500 optimal, so chaos to order. And in the competence model, going from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. So that last one is where it works and you don't have to think about it that much. And it's you can see from what's message center to we fully operationalized managing this data stream and integrated it into our other change management processes. So it's just another process that's well defined, well running in the overall IT organization.
Michael,
go ahead.
I'm not sure a lot of people are familiar with the message center tasks and planner approach.
Okay.
Could you just talk through that a little bit? I mean,
Yeah.
I was just going through the steps in our tenant to just see how it looks now, but you know, I think one of the things about the message center is that it's very hidden from most people, and by syncing to planner, you're actually bringing that information out into wherever you need it, right?
That is very true. That's a good point, because there's a key access barrier that you're crossing when you do that. So let me load up this in my personal tenant. This is not my work tenant. And
while you're doing that, I think you know, I was just hinting at something. A benefit of doing this is that you can start to make this part of the governance for everybody in the organization, not just the admins. You know, the message center is aimed at admins, but if we want end users to know, hey, you know, the list experience is going to change on this date, it would be nice to get that information out there for them.
Absolutely. So message center, first, here's message center, and in admin.microsoft.com. And you can see this is my personal tenant where I have not been managing message center. We got 585 items in here. So you've got the message title, you can favorite them. It's not something I found particularly useful, but again, it's there if you want to leverage it. The service, you can filter on which services. So I see all the changes in Teams. Let's clear that. And let's see, last updated act by and relevance. Relevance is a newer column based on the usage of the services. It's an estimate of how impactful this will be. Status for your organization. This is also a newer column and is really addresses some customer feedback about how do we know when these changes have actually taken place. Well, if it's marked as launched, it has landed. Tags, you can start and filter on you can filter on these. And are there any other columns here? You can see the message ID, category, and platform. But working with them here is pretty hard, and that's why planner syncing. So what you can do is you can set this up and sync it to a particular planner. And so let me go over to tasks.office.com. We'll go into Message Center Triage Planner. Now, again, this is my personal tenant where I don't really manage this. so you can see some of this, but so here's a plan. No, so to Mark's point, the big difference here, one of the big differences here is that this one is secured. In order to get access to this, you need to have the message center reader permission role. And so that is considered a privileged role. So you might be giving someone a separate account, but it's primarily considered an admin function. If you've got internal communicators that your IT department partners with, giving them access to this is only somewhat useful, depending on the business process you build around it. However, if you sync to Planner, you can add other people to the plan, and you can add the regular user accounts, because at this point, this is not considered an admin interface anymore, even though the content is. So you can have a bucket for communications and a bucket for help desk. And as changes come in, so the same change that we saw in Message Center looks like this in Planner. So the workload and the Message Center ID are in the title. Message Center ID is here, the publish date, the category, the tags, the relevance. So it says processing. This will eventually be updated with the relevance assessment. The problem is that these pieces of metadata aren't really available to manipulate. So yeah, you can search on them, but for working in this is the level 300, level 400, working through Planner. If you're going to go to level 500, you probably have decided that Planner doesn't give you the flexibility you need, and maybe you have built out something to sync Message Center to a list where you can have each piece of metadata have its own column, and then you can do views and workflows and all this stuff. And meanwhile, I've also been petitioning the product team behind Message Center that they should really offer a list sync as well, because it would give us better management of the metadata, or better ability to work with the metadata and build business processes around it. But at the level 300 and 400, working with this in Planner is at least reasonable. And so you can read through the change, and let's look at a different one. Let's see. So here, when will this happen? How will this affect your organization? What do you need to do to prepare? Often it says no action is needed to prepare for this to change. Often that's a lie. When will this happen? Targeted release. So if you have users, and even that, there's targeted release doesn't necessarily differentiate between targeted release entire tenant and targeted release specific users. So sometimes you need to go back to the Message Center post, give it a thumbs down saying, hey, I need specific information on which kind of targeted release is that. Standard release, we will begin rolling this out early March and be complete by mid-March. So you know that come March 1, you can start watching for it. And by March, I call it March 15th or so, it might be there, definitely by March 30th. This is a 2-week rollout approximately. It's between 2 and 4 weeks, I suppose. There are other ones that say starting early March and complete by late June or late December. Some things roll out fast, some things roll out slow. This is what the change is. And so this is the stuff you need to know. And then now you need to decide, does this need to go to, if this is just sort of informational and I want the help desk team to be aware of it, I could assign it to their bucket, or I could, you can assign it to people. So if I have a help desk leader in the in my triage meeting, maybe I'll assign this to them. Maybe I'll assign it to people from a couple different workloads. So this might be help desk and SharePoint. And then the bucket you put it in might be more SharePoint than help desk, but you can assign it to people with different responsibilities who all have some kind of responsibility for dealing with this. Here you can see there's links to, in this case, pictures attached. Those pictures show up. This is MC. This one.
Michael, a question for you. When you're triaging these changes, and either it says you should communicate to your users, or you decide that it's something that you should communicate to your users, what mechanisms are you using to do that?
So in terms of the message center post, in Planner, I will assign it to our comms team, which I could maybe do by putting in the comms bucket. I'll assign it to our comms point of contact. I might do something like, depending on what this is add to the monthly what's new post in our resources site. It might be something that, and some of this is up to the comms team to bring their knowledge and expertise about how we want to communicate about this. In my organization, we have a number of different communication channels. There is a couple different newsletters that the comms team publishes, which are just emails. But there's one that's the IT Weekly Digest. There's the one that is goes to all the leaders across the organization. There's a couple others. We have the resources site is a SharePoint site we built out with a bunch of resources to help people use M365. There's a different presentation that I have on SlideShare that talks about the framework for how we've organized the information both in our resources site and in some of the communications we do, where we're really trying to translate a technical change into how does this relate to the kinds of things that you deal with every day, and make it more understandable and more actionable for the user. If the change is for only a targeted number of users, for example, recent deprecation was announced that Publisher is going away in 2 years. And yes, sometimes you get as much as 2 years notice on a change. So if you aren't paying attention to Message Center at all, you might never know that Publisher is being discontinued. And you don't want to find out in December of 2026 because you get a help desk call, hey, I can't find Publisher on my machine, and that's because Office update came through and it's no longer installed. You've got Message Center is giving you 2 years to be aware of that change. So in that case, like we've got some analytics from config.office.com that says in our organization of about 3,000 people, in the last 2 weeks, Excel has been started 70,000 times. Publisher has been started 8 times. However, we can then use some of our other tools to find out who is the between 1 and 8 users who actually ran Publisher, and work with them in advance to migrate them to other tools.
So that's, I mean, you're describing a level of sophistication that I think would be wonderful to see in a lot of organizations where, IT tends to keep this information a little bit too close to their chest, and then the end users have stuff happen. And,
right.
That's a lower level of maturity. So I think that communication chain is a big measure of, it's not just admins understanding what's coming up, but it's also making sure that the people who use these tools understand what's coming up. So when you went through your levels, I think that's a big metric.
Starting
right
at
there.
level 400, it's communicate, and you're right, that is absolutely part of level 500. But there's workflows and integrations built around that. So for example, if we're asking our communications team to do a new communication campaign, they want us to fill out a form. Well, at level 500, with just a click of a change message, perhaps, again, maybe we've built out a SharePoint list that automatically pulls these things in. We can kick off a workflow, fill that form out through APIs, and maybe even go so far as automatically do a scheduling poll to get time together with our comms team to discuss the change. Starting at maybe even to some extent level 300, communications is part of that. And it like as you said, it's really about when the changes are impactful, letting users know so that their lives are disrupted as minimally as possible. But remember that everyone gets far too much email, and and we talked about email as a communication method. That's one. We also do digital signage. And we also have the digital signage is also correlated or the same as the screensavers. So if you walk away from your machine, and the screensaver comes on, and you're getting the same messages as you see on the digital signage when you walk into the reception area of one of our offices. And I mean, we could do things like, if you've got a Yammer all company, you could maybe push something to that. So there's lots. So figuring out what the communication channels are, that's a partnership activity with comms, and figuring out which messages need to get pushed to the organization is also something of partnership with comms. So the balance is, like, of the 1433 messages we got last year, roughly half we felt were not significant enough that, or didn't affect anyone, and we just closed them. IT service owners either needed to know about them and that was it, or they were for workloads or capabilities that we're not using. But the ones that were impactful, then it's a matter of, okay, how impactful is this? If this is a button is moving an Outlook in a screen that people use every day, that's probably something you want to communicate about a lot. If it's about something that's changing in another app and it's automatically going to have a tooltip to introduce people to it, you may not necessarily need to do certainly a standalone email about it. Maybe it's something that's worth a bullet point in a combined communication about that and 10 other changes.
One of the things that we'll often do with our clients is build a governance site, and so those announcements those message center posts that might have general relevance could be news posts in that governance site, as an example.
I would be
that way
careful about posting a message center post pretty much as is.
And the English version.
Right. Well, but that's the thing, is that it's IT and comms who have to work together to translate that from M365 technical speak to end user communications.
No, absolutely. I would never suggest sharing the actual message center posts, because they're generally sort of hard to figure out, even when you know what they mean.
Yeah,
I think,
and that's another reason we give
for
thumbs downs, is if you get a message center post and it's just too vague and you can't tell whether it's actionable or not, give it a thumbs down. Microsoft does pay attention to signals, and so that will help them improve over time. Or something that talks about something but doesn't include any pictures, and they're talking about something visual, give it a thumbs down. Say, I need pictures for this. That kind of feedback will improve things over time. I see Terrence has a hand raised.
Thanks, Michael. I'm interested on your view or opinion on the parity between what's in the roadmap and what's in Message Center. because I was in a similar role to you a few years ago and tried to build something that would have approached level 300. And I was constantly pissed off, if I'm going to be blunt, about how I would be tracking something in Message Center and then something would happen. And then it's like, oh, that was in the roadmap. So having to monitor the roadmap and the Message Center independently, I kind of gave up on the roadmap and just focused on Message Center. So
I would agree.
Because it's a long time since I looked at that, what is your view on how close those two are now?
So roadmap should be the road farther ahead, and Message Center should be what's happening in my tenant sooner.
Yeah.
And I've pretty much given up on looking at the roadmap, except for, hey, someone complained about a feature or function. Is there anything about that app in the roadmap? And let's see what the plans are for that. But in terms of what's going to happen to what's going to actually land in my tenant in the next 1 to 3 months or less, I focus on Message Center.
Okay.
There are views of the roadmap where we can see what things changed or added to the roadmap in the last 2 weeks, but when they add those are usually a couple months out, and so I find that even reading them isn't worthwhile because it's not actionable.
Yeah, that was my second question. How do you handle that, the very loose link between we get the post in Message Center, 6 months time, XYZ is going to happen. That's great for MVPs to go post on LinkedIn and Twitter because we're on the bleeding edge. But if I tell an end user community, you're going to lose access to something, or you're going to get a new feature in 6 months' time, they'll be like, go away, because tell me when it's relevant. So
right.
And what I ended up doing was just manually going back and checking, like having a separate spreadsheet.
Right.
This should land round about July. Let's go look in July. Oh, it's not here yet.
In Planner, you can set a due date for a task. And so if you have this will roll out, like we saw, middle of March to end of March, I will set the due date to March 31st. If it's about a new feature arriving. What we've found or kind of landed on is for new feature arrivals, it's probably better to tell the user after it's landed, like right after it's landed, because if you tell it before, you tend still not to be sure exactly when it'll land, and so if you tell them too much before, they'll forget about it by the time it lands. If you tell them right after it lands, then it's more meaningful. Unless it's going to be something disruptive, then you do it as close to before it lands as possible. And in some cases where you've got the ability to, if it's a new service, that's when your mitigation activities come into play, where you can set your controls to disable it when it lands, and then you can pick when to turn it on, and then you can do a planned communication and so forth.
I was really interested in that column that you pointed out is fairly new about, this feature has landed. And if I investigated the APIs for Message Center. So if that column value is exposed in the API and you have something that's monitoring that, then will then tell you that's now flipped over to it's landed in your tenant, then you can at least coordinate your comms as close as possible. So I think that's more value, and I'll look into it again in my new role. But it's really, really interesting presentation. Kind of validates a lot of what I was trying to do a couple of years ago. But seeing it articulated in this framework has been very helpful. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. I mean, like, there are a couple of us in the MVP community who are sort of fanatical about Message Center, and you've got Daryl Webster and Daniel Glenn who do a show about it, and there's a focus group I'm in called VNext Change Management, run by Eddie Savage, where we get to provide more direct feedback to the product team behind Message Center. So you mentioned that API. I don't know if that attribute's in the API. Certainly, if it's in Message Center, it ought to be in the API. So if it isn't, let me know and I can go advocate for that. Let's see. I see in the chats there's some features that roll out. I mean, not only are they rolling out to all the behind-the-scenes servers across the world, and so you don't really know when it's landing, when it's going to land on yours, other than that big window. But also, it could potentially land differentially for some users, and yeah, that can be a struggle. Something else I was going to say about that. I do want to mention in our resources guide that that if you read closely for the practical scenario, practical scenario on service change management, we currently, the way it's written, we also talk about service health management in there. And one of the things I want to work with Marc and the team here on is breaking that out into its own competency, because the more I think about it, the more the two are significantly different. Service health management tends to be purely reactive, and whereas Message Center change management can be more proactive. Let's see. We've already been taking questions, but I do also want to put in a plug for save the date for Saturday, July 20th for the next M365 Chicago conference or one-day event, community event. And if that's something that you'd be interested in sponsoring, let me know. We're going to do a call for speakers soon. It is our first in-person event in several years, actually since COVID. The last SharePoint Saturday was right before COVID shut everything down. And so M365 Chicago has been an evolution of that. This is not to be confused with the SharePoint Fest, 365 EduCon, 365 TechCon, which also comes to Chicago, although not this year. They'll be back in Chicago next year. This is M365 Chicago is a community event. The 365 EduCon, SharePoint Fest, the thing that David Wilhelm runs, is a professionally run event. Any other questions?
Michael, if you wouldn't mind just going to the next slide.
Okay.
We'll just wrap things up. Here are links to the various artifacts in the maturity model if you don't have them. This slide deck will be posted in that slide deck's link in a few minutes as soon as I do it. Our next call is March 19th, and we're hoping we will see all of you then, and ask your friends and family to join us too. Michael, thanks so much for taking the time to go through this with you. I think it's a really helpful set of topics for especially admins to think about, but organizations in general, like you said, communication departments, to get to a high level of maturity on this, you do need to have some holistic thinking, which I think you've captured really well. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone who wants to
us
talk more about Message Center, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am always happy talking about Message Center. And yeah.
Shall we close it down? Thank you very much, Marc. It was really, really great. I learned some new things as well, which is always is great as well. So I hope everyone else did too.
Yeah, great session.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All.
Thanks all.
Bye,
See you
guys.
on March 19th. Take care. Have good weeks.